In this video, we're going to play around with type, and we're going to look at text animators and some of the things we can do with those. So I have a new composition opened up in here. What I'll do is maybe start with some type. So I'll click on the type tool. Let me just readjust my screen a little bit. All right, so here's a new composition. This is HD settings. It looks like it's 5 seconds, which is okay with me. I'm gonna, like I said, use the text tool and draw some text, and I can make a text box which will help me position it, or maybe I won't even do that. I'll click here and I can start writing my text. Maybe I'll start with, okay, so this is some text here, and if you want to change it, you can always select it, and there should be a window on the side. If you don't see it, it should be character, and I believe it might just be lower in my screen. You can see here there's a window called character, and I can change whatever text I want. Okay, so let's get into this text layer and see what's inside. Open up the layer itself, and you can see some of the stuff looks familiar. Anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity, those are normal layer properties, but inside of this you'll also get a text panel here, and inside of here we have options for using paths, or we have source text, which maybe we'll do first, and then we'll do animation. So if we wanted to keyframe this text, maybe we want it to change from 1, and then over here we want it to say 2. We can turn the keyframes on, and you can see that they actually came in as hold keyframes, so that they'll hold their value, and then when they get to the new value they'll switch. And so I'm just going to each second, and I want to make sure I'm in the same layer, and I wrote 3. I think that's enough for us to do. Let's play it. So this is what keyframing the source text would look like. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's fine. For right now, this next thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to delete all those keyframes, so I've gotten rid of that animation, and maybe I want to use a little bit more text so that I can see some of my animation. So maybe I'll actually write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can see that if you go to the paragraph panel, I'm on center mode, but maybe I want to change it to left aligned. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's go into this animate panel here. This is the text animator, and this lets us kind of animate these different properties of the text, and also kind of pick and choose the range that we want to animate, and all those things can be animated together, so it's really powerful. Maybe we'll start with position. Okay, so you can see that there's 2 components to this. There's the range selector, so what is selected, and you can see if I zoom in to here, if I play with this, you can see that there is a little line here that shows me where the what the range is. And so if I want to just say select 1 and 2, I can go to that area right here, and then under I'm in this animator that I just created, I can change the position, and you can start to see that this is based off of a percentage right now, so I might need to tweak it a little bit. But what I could do is I'd say that you can try 2 different ways to animate things, one by animating the range and one by animating the value that the property that you're trying to change. So for example, if we didn't want to animate the range and we just wanted this section of type to move up, we could keyframe things so that they started down here and then they moved up. So I think back up to 0. And what would that look like? 1, 2, and that's a little, that's a little short. Well, that's a little long, but so by using this range selector and animating the property, we can affect things that way. I want to, I guess, undo what I just did, and maybe we'll start another way. Let's try right now the range selector has nothing selected. Or maybe I should do it the other way, just to show you how this works. Let's start by animating the range selector itself. So maybe we could keep the position itself the same, and I wanted to show just what happens when the entire range is selected, and maybe we start off this way. So we'll right now the whole range is selected, and this, you can think about this transformation as being applied. But if I change the range like this, you can see that range as defined by, again, this, you can see this line here that shows you that's the thing I'm going to animate, and that's the thing that you should see changing. And it's a little bit fast, and it's a little bit it needs a little bit of work, but we could try we could try keyframing. Let's talk about how to fix this from here. That doesn't really make that big of a difference. I think if we start adding an ease and ease high and ease low, these are kind of like it's a little bit smoother that way. Part of it could be that maybe this is happening over a really short time period, so if you stretch this out, it might be a little bit slower. But the other part of it is that if you look at this little, if you look at the range here, when I go frame by frame, and a good keyboard shortcut for frame by frame is, it's page up and page down, so it's F function up arrow, function down arrow. You can see that it jumps really quickly, and that to me is kind of an issue. So the reason it's doing that is we have the shape of this range selector set to square, which is, you can kind of think of it as a really rough edge, or like a kind of a sharp edge. We can use something like ramp up or ramp down, triangle. Like some of these other shapes will give you a better animation. So if I go, and actually some of them though will sort of change the nature of the selection. So you can see that these parts are selected and these aren't. They each have their own kind of style to them. I actually, for something like this, I might do something like ramp up. A ramp is kind of a more gentle, and you can kind of see that looks a little bit more gentle. But after I've done this, maybe one thing you're seeing is, and actually let me go back and forth. So this is what ramp up looks like. If I go back to square, you can see the whole region is affected, is selected. So the issue with ramp up or ramp down, this is a ramp up, is that it changes how the selection is applied. And then what we need to do to counterbalance that is actually shift the offset of this. So if you want a smoother animation, you might also need to animate the offset, because what we're going to do now is use the shape, that ramped shape, and let's animate the offset from -100, and we can then move it over to here, and you should see that it's a little bit smoother. And you could also you can also move this around. I think if you get that, you can play with the animation and the speed, and there's more you can do in there. So those are some really helpful things to know about. If we wanted to go a little bit further into this, one thing that is good to know is there's two levels of these text animators. One is like a text animator that has its own range selector. If we want to use the same range selector but add another property to animate, let's say we want to also affect scale, we can hit add within the animator one that's labeled here, and we're adding in a new property, scale. And what we'll do is maybe we'll start off smaller, like this. So you can see we're at 30%, and then it gets bigger as well. This is if we want the animation to happen across the same kind of timing and they're using the same range selector. It's also possible, let me delete that, that you want the animation to happen at sort of on a different time. So maybe we'll make our own or another one. You can see that this is animator, comes in as animator 2, and this will allow us to do the same thing that we did before. Instead of the square edge, let me do a ramp up. I want this scaling maybe to occur a little bit later. So maybe I will, let me turn the scaling to 50. So what does this look like here? Actually, let me go backwards and make sure that I have changed the offset. So I'm changing the offset because the ramp up shape was a little bit different. And then what I'll do is I'll animate the offset, but I want it to happen a little bit later in the time. So the offset will maybe start here, and then over time it'll change. You can see that by stacking different timings in here, we might be able to create a different type of feel. That's not that great, but I'm just playing around with this and showing you some different options. And you can add some easing in here. The ease high and ease low will add a little bit of easing into your animation. So this text animator properties, these things are really powerful, and you can do a lot with them as long as you know how to use them. So there's a bunch of different things to explore in here. I'm going to make a duplicate of this. Actually, I just want the text, but I want to get rid of all the animators. So just to show you, it's really easy to take off these animators, just select them and delete them, and then you have the original thing that you had there. I want to talk about some other things in here that might be interesting too. Let's do opacity. So we're going to do a range selector and opacity. If you go into the advanced settings, you can see that it by default uses percentage, but we can also use index, which is the number of the elements. We can use the index of the characters, or you can actually use words or lines. So if you wanted these words to appear one by one or in a specific order, you could change it to index and words. And let's just show you what that does. Okay, so you can see that the range then changes. Oops, I haven't changed any properties here. Let me go to change the opacity to 0, and then let's animate the offset. Okay, so I'm going to use index here, and what I'll do is I have 5 words set up, and then so I'll change the range. I'll start at 0, and then I'll move up. I really only need to go up to 5. So you can see that doing this lets me go and animate each word by word. And maybe I'll just spread it out a little bit more so that you can see that it really is a word by word animation that's being created. And you don't necessarily have to do them at the same timing. You could choose to, let's say, make this the first word, and maybe this comes really quickly. 1, 2, and then there's a pause. 3, 4, 5. So this again is a nice way to change or get more control of the animation. Okay, and okay, so I'm going to make another copy of this and just playing with the same elements, but I want to show different things. I'm going to get rid of that animator actually that we had, and I wanted to start to use the path options here. So one thing I'm going to do is, with the layer selected, is go ahead and start to draw a path. Now this is coming in as a mask. Okay, and maybe I want to just round this off a little bit more. Okay, so inside of the path options, what we'll do is we'll select the path, and now this mask is on the layer. I'm going to tell the text to align itself to that mask or that path. And from here, what's nice is there's some options here as far as reversing the path. What does that look like going the other way? And within here, so what we're going to do is animate the first margin. Maybe we'll start at 0, and then we'll just move it along. So here is some animated type on a path. Maybe we'll do this on a circle just for kicks. So with the layer selected, let's draw a circle mask onto it, and then we'll go back into our mask options or path options. And instead of mask 1, let's do mask 2. And there we go. We have that. We're using the circle as the path, and then we can move this around as well. And there could be some other things here that you'd want to explore. I mean, you can combine. I can imagine you combining other elements here. Maybe we can play with the tracking in here, and we could have a range selector on this. I'm just going to change the tracking amount and show that. But that could be something that animates as well. So maybe it gets smaller as we move around the circle. And I'm hitting U to look at all the keyframes, so you might want to time them so that they happen sequentially or together. That's up to you. None of this stuff is really pretty. It's just here to show you some of the techniques. So I hope that's been helpful in giving you some ideas on things you can do with text animators. Okay, so just to review text animators again, when we have a text layer, we can animate certain properties here. We'll open up the layer and we can click this button, animate, and you can see there are lots of different options for us to try out. I don't think we've done this one yet. Maybe we'll try this one, character offset. When you create an animator, there's two things to look at, both the range selector and the property that's being changed, in this case, character offset. So the range selector lets us choose what areas to affect. The character offset, in this case, you can see we could do like a jumbled animation. Right now, it's selecting the whole range. We talked about the different types of range selectors or the advanced options here. We can soften it by changing the type of the shape of that range selector. We can also use offset and keyframe, start, end, offset, and also the actual property here to get different effects. And there's a lot to explore here, and I encourage you to just kind of play around with this and see what you come up with. So here's an example of using the character range animation or property, animating that, so you can see if you wanted to have the letters animate in a different way, that's something you could do. The next thing I want to talk about is doing a kinetic type animation and some of the different steps that you might go through to accomplish that. So I could do this whole thing in After Effects if I wanted to, but I wanted to show this other workflow. You might want to design your composition in Illustrator or Photoshop ahead of time. You maybe you have these type compositions and you want to animate them to sound. Okay, so here is an Illustrator file with some text in it. The song that I'm going to animate this text to is Old Town Road. And I have some lyrics from the chorus. You can see that this layer has the text in it in separate text boxes, which is good to know how this is structured. I want to bring this into After Effects, like I said, and convert these text boxes into text layers so that I can use the text animators that we talked about earlier. One problem is that I can't actually export or import this into After Effects and convert Illustrator layers this way. What I need to do is actually export this as a Photoshop file and then import the Photoshop layers. Sounds like a complicated process, but it's actually kind of a good thing to know if you're a motion designer or a designer who works in Illustrator and then needs to kind of fix things in Photoshop, maybe add textures and other things. So what we're going to do is go to Export As, and this file will save it down as a Photoshop file. You can go into here and find the Photoshop file, and we'll save that out. I believe I have that already saved, but I'll just overwrite it, and color mode RGB and 72 is good. One thing to keep in mind with After Effects imports is that you want to work in RGB mode. So be careful if you're working in Illustrator in CMYK. You do want to be working in RGB. Okay, let's see what the Photoshop file looks like. Here's the Photoshop file, and you can see that that text layer came in as a folder, but each of these different parts, the text boxes, came in as its own layer, which is great because that lets us animate those individually in After Effects. Okay, so you've seen the Illustrator file and you've seen the Photoshop file. Let's go into After Effects now. In our After Effects file, we're going to import that Photoshop file that we saw earlier. And here, remember to import it as a composition. It's super important. Editable layer styles, that's fine. Okay, so we have this composition that came in. You can see this is what we created. You'll see that this text, remember in Photoshop it was in a folder, so it actually came in as a pre-composition. And if what does that mean? It means it's an internal composition. If you double click on it, you can get to the assets themselves. What I might do is actually just copy. Actually, I might just cut these out just to make sure that everything's in the same file. That's up to you, but just for illustration purposes, I wanted to animate everything in here. And right now you can see that these are Photoshop layers. To do the conversion, we'll right click on this. I have them all selected, and then I'll say create convert to editable text, and this will let me access the text animators that we talked about earlier. So inside of here you can see, oh, here we have the text options. I can change the source text, I could put it on a path, I could add an animator, which maybe we'll just do that for the heck of it. Maybe we'll have it kind of animate on, or maybe it animates from the top. And again, what I said is you could animate the range selector, or you could animate the property. Let's see what it looks like if we do this. So this is just a simple animation, of the coming in like that. Okay, and again, the reason I went through this process is I want to access those text animators. If you have a composition and you don't really need those options, maybe you just leave them in as Illustrator layers or Photoshop layers, and just you can animate them as separate assets. That's fine. Okay, the next step here is we're going to bring in some audio. I want to bring in the song here, and this came in as an MP3, and I'm going to drag this into my composition down here. For the purposes of copyright issues on YouTube and things like that, I have the song here, and I'm going to be playing it, but the audio won't be audible. But I'm going to show you what I'm doing by actually showing you the visual waveform of this, so that you can see. And I'm going to talk through the techniques I'm going to use here. So if you open up the audio here, you can see you have access to audio options, audio levels. We can keyframe, and you can see the waveform here. Now, wherever there's sound, you'll see a graphic here, and the louder it is, the larger the graphic is. So these are probably the beats in the song. And if I'm working and I want to get playback, I just want to make sure that this button here is checked, the audio, include audio, and I'm able to listen to it. Like I said, you probably won't be able to hear it in this video, but it's there. I also want to talk about some other option here that's important. If you can't hear audio, and this might happen to you, you might need to go into your system settings and look at the audio, or in After Effects, go to audio hardware or audio output mapping. Just want to show you this right now. And you can see that I have set this to my microphone. I have headphones plugged into my microphone, and in your case, you might have either built-in output or some other audio hardware that you want to push the sound to. So just be careful of that if you can't hear any audio. So what I wanted to do is kind of find the portion in the song where the lyrics and the audio line up and animate to that sound. Now I know for a fact that right now this composition is 10 seconds long, and the chorus that this is part of is probably not for quite some time. I'm going to just click and drag this, and again, to show you, like, visually we can kind of understand this getting louder right here. Probably when the chorus will occur when it gets the loudest. Just guessing, maybe it's like around here, so I might start listening to the audio here. So that's not actually the chorus, but I can just kind of keep clicking and dragging. And obviously, if you know where the time is, you could, move this ahead and play with it. Okay, so after some scrubbing, I found this to be the start of that of the chorus. I want to show you one thing I might do to make it a little bit easier, because it's kind of hard to keep listening to the song and trying to sync to it. Sometimes it's good to actually leave a marker here so that you can visually see where it is. I'm going to right click on the layer, and I'll go to markers. I'll go to add marker. You can see that the keyboard shortcut is Control 8. So from here, if this might give me a good clue. I could even leave a comment here. Maybe I'll write chorus, and that way you can actually see that marker in here. The other thing that you might want to do is, if you have beats that you're trying to animate to, I'm going to press play, and as it's going, I'm going to hit Control 8 to leave markers in the audio where I think I'm going to need some sort of signal for myself. So let's see what that would, how that would work. I want to select the audio track here, and I'm going to try that again. Okay, so I've got and these are the different beats that I had. I think this was the next line. Okay, so what I might want to do is, maybe I'll start this from the beginning. I want to show this one part. Let's say we wanted to fade in the audio. What we can do is set a keyframe for the audio levels, and we want it to go up to the normal level, but maybe we start off at a negative value, -50, and you can see that decreased the volume, the decibels, and now it's fading in when it plays the audio. So you might have that, and then visually, maybe what I'll do is, it looks like it's going this way. I'm going to try to line these up roughly to the, oh, whoops. Looks like the layers came in a little out of order, but that's okay. I think it's, if I'm looking at the lyrics, they'll go, take my horse to the Old Town Road. Okay, so, and maybe it's something like this. You can see that they're going to pop on in that order, and I'm using these markers to help me time it. This Old Town Road thing didn't get animated. Okay, so now we have this sequence, and again, I've converted these to text layers so that I can access those text animators in there, but you might not even use them. You might just try to mask them on or animate their other properties. One last thing to show here is, let's say we had kind of a tracking shot, or we wanted to move, maybe scale up all the type or scale it down, or kind of move it around. You could animate all these layers individually, but it would be kind of a hassle, and to make changes, it would be tough because you'd have to change so many keyframes together. So I want to show this idea of creating a null object and then parenting to that null object. What we'll do is create a new layer, null object up here. Now this is just like an empty layer, null It's nothing, and you don't see it. You see like these controls here, but in the actual file you don't see anything. What we're going to do is grab all these other layers, and we'll parent it to that null. So we select the parent here. Look up here, it says parent and link. So what that does is we've created this parent and child relationship. Whenever the parent moves, all the children layers will move with it. So what that means is I can start keyframing. I'm moving this along, and maybe that's how I start. I'm animating just the null object, but it's actually moving all the other layers because those are parented. So if we wanted to do some other things like, quick moves to maybe focus on the type that's being spoken, maybe I'll also animate the scale. You can see I'm just using some keyboard shortcuts to jump around. Maybe here it gets large or something like that. So, I'm experiencing some playback issues in my sound and my speed, so it's going to look really choppy. But the main thing is to show you this technique of creating a null and parenting all the other layers to it, and this gives you more control over the whole composition. Imagine having to do all this keyframing to all the individual layers. It would really get to be difficult. So again, hopefully this process of importing an external file, animating or importing a sound file, and then animating to that sound is now clear. And try doing this with an audio track that you like, and try to see if you can make a dynamic kinetic type animation from it.